Each practice guide recommendation is assigned a level of evidence that summarizes the rigorous research supporting the recommendation. To determine whether the level of evidence is minimal, moderate, or strong, the WWC reviews and assesses all the research related to the core practice in each recommendation. Each core practice in the guide is recommended by the expert panel, regardless of the level of evidence. In this practice guide, a recommendation's level of evidence summarizes our confidence about two main issues. First, that the recommended practice, and not something else, consistently caused improved outcomes for students in the studies. Second, that the students and contexts in the studies capture the diversity of the students and contexts in secondary math classrooms in the United States. Context primarily refers to the setting of the study, for example, a classroom or a psychology laboratory, and what the study compares the recommended practice to. The first recommendation in the Algebra guide was assigned a minimal level of evidence. A minimal level of evidence does not mean that there is no research evidence supporting the recommendation. Actually, several studies meeting WWC standards found that the practices in the first recommendation were effective. However, the context of these studies were very limited. Each study compared the suggested practice to the same alternative approach of providing students with more practice problems. To achieve a higher level of evidence, the studies would need to compare the suggested practice to more diverse practices. For this recommendation, the study comparisons did not reflect the diversity of approaches typically occurring in algebra classrooms. We know that there are other approaches being implemented, but the level of evidence only summarizes the current research. Therefore, the minimal level of evidence reflects the fact that the recommended practices have only been rigorously tested against one approach. The second recommendation includes 3 suggested practices. Several studies found that 2 of the 3 suggested practices, reflective questioning and differential representations, were effective. However, based on their professional judgment, the panel also wanted to suggest a third practice about mathematical language, and there is no rigorous research evidence examining this specific practice. Because 1 out of the 3 practices did not have supporting research evidence, this recommendation was assigned a minimal level of evidence. It is important to note that this overall recommendation received a minimal level of evidence, even though there is rigorous research evidence supporting 2 of the suggested practices. Several studies demonstrated that the suggested practices included in the third recommendation could improve outcomes. In addition, the study's context and students had some diversity. For example, in some supporting studies, the suggested practices were compared to diverse approaches and students were in urban and suburban schools. However, the studies did not include high school students, who are an important group of students who receive algebra instruction. Therefore, this recommendation was assigned a moderate level of evidence. To summarize, all of the recommendations in the practice guide are supported by rigorous research. Minimal evidence does not mean no evidence. A minimal level of evidence means that some research studies may support the practice, but more rigorous research is needed to examine the effect of the recommended practices. If you'd like more information about the specific study features that the WWC examines to determine the level of evidence, you can find a detailed list in Appendix Table A1 in each practice guide. We'd like to hear what you think. If you have comments or questions, you can contact us at info@whatworks.ed.gov.